The desert wind carried the smell of smoke, and fear long before the sun dipped beneath the crimson hills. Colt Mercer rode alone, his horse's hooves thudding softly in the dying light, his shadow stretching thin across the sand. The sky above was bruised with purple and gray, and every gust whispered like a ghost through the dry sage. He had been tracking wild horses near the San Carlos edge, but something else called him now. Something alive, desperate, and human. The echo of a woman's voice, faint and broken, rolled along the canyon walls. Colt slowed his bay mare, his hand hovering over the worn grip of his revolver. "Who's there?" he called, his voice low, swallowed by the wind. No answer, just a rustle of brush and the cry of a hawk circling above. He swung down, boots sinking into the sand, and followed the sound toward a narrow gulch split by a ribbon of moonlit water. That's where he saw her, an Apache girl, half collapsed by the stream, blood streaking her shoulder, her breath shallow and trembling. Her eyes, dark as obsidian, met his with a fierce mix of fear and defiance. "Don't," she whispered when he took a step closer. "They'll come." Her words were sharp, desperate. Behind her, the footprints in the sand told the rest of the story. She wasn't alone. Colt's instinct screamed to turn back. Apache country wasn't a place for kindness. But something in her eyes held him still, something fragile and burning. He knelt beside her anyway, tearing a strip from his saddle blanket to press against the wound. "You're bleeding bad," he said quietly. "If you stay, you die. If you ride, maybe you live." She looked past him, toward the horizon fading into shadow. "They'll kill us both," she said. He almost smiled, a small, bitter curve of the lips. "Then we best make it hard for them to try." The silence deepened, broken by the low murmur of the stream. A far-off coyote howled, and Colt could almost feel the night thickening. He lifted her gently, setting her across his horse. She flinched but didn't fight him. Her hair, tangled with dust, brushed against his arm. The wind picked up, sweeping sand in pale spirals across the rocks. As he mounted behind her, she turned her head slightly. "You mustn't help me," she whispered. "You don't know what I've done." Colt's jaw tightened. "Don't much matter who you are," he said, spurring the horse into motion. "Just where we're going." Behind them, a faint drumbeat rose, a rhythm deep and distant, like thunder crawling from the mountains. The sound of pursuit. He didn't look back. The girl did. Her lips parted, and he caught her words in the wind like a curse. "Take me away before dawn, or they'll kill me." And as the first stars broke through the dark, Colt realized he had just crossed a line he'd never ride back across. They rode through the canyon in silence, shadows stretching long across the earth as the moon climbed higher. The girl clung weakly to the saddle horn, her breath shallow, each jolt of the horse a wince of pain. Colt kept one hand on the reins, the other ready near his gun, his eyes flicking to every ridge and shadow. Somewhere behind them, the drumbeat still pulsed, faint, patient, like the steady heartbeat of vengeance. The desert was wide, but not wide enough to outrun men who knew every rock and ravine. The air grew colder as they climbed higher into bluffs, the stars so sharp they looked carved into black glass. The girl whispered something in Apache, her voice faint as the wind. Colt didn't understand, but he knew a prayer when he heard one. He guided the mare toward a jagged outcrop and dismounted. The horse's flanks steamed in the night air. "We'll rest here," he said quietly. She didn't answer. Her head had dropped forward, dark hair falling over her face. He lifted her down, setting her against a flat rock near a small fire pit, left cold by some traveler long gone. He struck flint, coaxing flame into life. The light washed over her face, delicate features streaked with dirt, eyes half open but fierce even in exhaustion. When she finally spoke, her words came slowly, as though every syllable cost her. "You shouldn't have done it." He glanced up from the fire. "Done what?" "Stopped," she said. "You could have passed. You could have lived." Colt let out a low breath, shaking his head. "Ma'am, I stopped thinking about living a long time ago." The flames crackled between them, casting long shadows that danced across the canyon walls. Her gaze softened just for a moment. Then the sound of a horse echoed in the distance. One, maybe two. She stiffened instantly, fear flashed in her eyes. "They've found us," she whispered. Colt rose, scanning the darkness. The drum beats were gone now, replaced by the slow, deliberate clop of hooves. He could feel it, the way a man senses a storm before he sees the lightning. He moved quickly, dousing the fire with sand. The girl gripped his arm. "If they catch me, they'll take your scalp too. Ain't planning to give him the chance," he muttered. He lifted her back onto a horse, climbed up behind, and nudged the reins. They moved fast now, low to the ground, silent as ghosts. The stars turned above them, cold and bright. Colt's heart pounded in rhythm with the hooves, a steady drum of defiance against the night. When they reached the ridge, he looked down and froze. 3 riders below, torches burning like angry suns, cutting through the darkness. The girl's breath hitched. "My father leads them," she said softly. Colt looked at her, the truth settling heavy between them. "Then I reckon we both run out of good choices." The torches began to move toward the slope. He turned the horse toward the west, toward the black line of the desert horizon. The mare stumbled once, but kept running. Wind whipped the girl's hair against his face. The drums began again, closer now, their rhythm echoing off the stone. And just before they vanished into the dark, the girl said, almost to herself, "They won't stop till I'm dead." Colt didn't answer. He didn't need to. The sound of his revolver sliding free was answer enough. Somewhere behind them, the first gunshot split the night, and the desert swallowed the light of the torches one by one. By dawn, the desert had turned to fire. The first light spilled over the mesas, painting the sky in bruised reds and gold. Colt's horse stumbled once, exhausted, her breath a mist in the chill. They had ridden through the night with no rest, no words, just a relentless sound of pursuit fading and returning like a curse on the wind. The girl stirred against him, her body weak but her eyes still alive. She hadn't spoken since the gunfire. Her wound had bled through the cloth he'd tied around her arm, the dark stain spreading down to her fingers. Colt pulled the reins and slowed. "We stop here," he muttered. The mare halted near a dry creek bed lined with brittle brush. The air smelled of dust and old rain, the silence so sharp he could almost hear the earth breathe. He climbed down and helped her off, setting her gently against a boulder. For a moment, they just listened, to the whisper of wind through dead grass, to the soft rattle of a distant rattlesnake hidden somewhere in the rocks. "You said your father leads them," Colt said finally. Wise he hunted his own blood. Her lips parted, then closed again. She turned her face away, looking toward the rising sun. "I broke the law, my people," she said quietly. "I refused a marriage. The chief's son wanted me, but my heart did not." The words trailed off like smoke. "So your heart sent killers after you?" he asked, voice low. "My heart sent me into exile," she replied. "But they'll call it shame." Colt didn't answer. He poured a little water from his canteen over her wound and tore another strip from his coat to bind it tighter. She winced but didn't flinch. The sun climbed higher, turning the rocks gold. A hawk circled above, its cry cutting through the heat. "You should leave me here," she said suddenly. "Go south before they find you." Colt looked at her, his eyes as cold as the steel at his hip. "Ain't the first time I've been hunted," he said. "Won't be the last." He rose, scanning the ridge. Something shimmered there, movement, faint but real. He dropped low and drew his rifle. 3 figures on horseback crept along the crest, spears glinting in the light. They weren't close enough to shoot yet, but close enough to smell the dust of their quarry. Colt's mind turned quick. The land ahead was open, no cover but the dry brush and bones of dead cattle. He had 1 rifle, 2 hands, and a wounded stranger. He looked down at her. "You ride?" She nodded weakly. "Then we got a chance." He helped her onto the horse again, tie her hands to the saddle horn to steady her. The sound of hoofbeats echoed now, slow at first, then rising. Colt fired once into the air. The sound cracked across the canyon like thunder, scattering a flock of crows. "They'll come faster now," he said, climbing up behind her. "Good. I hate waiting." He spurred the mare into the open desert, the horse kicking up clouds of dust as they ran beneath a blood-red sky. Arrows hissed through the air behind them. One struck the saddle. Another sliced through his hat brim. The girl cried out, clinging tight. Colt ducked low, jaw clenched, eyes locked on the distant line of hills that shimmered in the heat haze. "Hold on," he growled, voice steady despite the chaos. "Ain't done with this sunrise yet." The chase tore across the desert like a nightmare born of dust and fire. The sun climbed high, white and merciless, turning the horizon into a blur of heat. Colt could taste grit on his tongue and blood in his throat. His mare panted beneath him, her muscles trembling, foam streaking her neck. The girl leaned forward, weak but holding on, her hair whipping against his jaw. Behind them, the riders closed in, their cries echoing like war songs through canyons. Spears glinted in the sunlight, arrows hissing like angry serpents. Colt turned in the saddle and fired. The report cracked through the air, and one rider fell hard, rolling into the dust. The others didn't slow. They fanned out, flanking him on both sides. The mare stumbled, nearly falling. Colt pulled her hard to the left, cutting toward a dry gulch. Rocks shattered under their hooves, sending shards of stone flying. He ducked another arrow, the wind screaming past his ears. "Keep your head down," he barked. The girl obeyed, clutching his coat with both hands. They burst through the canyon's mouth into open desert again, a vast plain of silver sand and broken stone. There was nowhere to hide, nowhere to run but forward. Cole could see the shimmer of a shack far ahead, small and half-buried under years of dust. Maybe it offered water, maybe cover, maybe death. He didn't care which. He spurred the horse onward. The air trembled with heat and fear. A bullet whined past his ear. One of the riders had drawn a stolen gun. Colt wheeled, fired twice, and the echo of the shots rolled across the wasteland like thunder. The rider fell silent. Two still followed. He felt the mare falter again, her breath ragged. He whispered under his breath, "Just a little further, girl, just a little more." The shack grew closer, leaning crookedly against a bluff of rock. He kicked the mare one last time, and she staggered into the shade of the overhang. Colt jumped down, pulling the girl with him. She stumbled, nearly falling, but he caught her by the arm and dragged her inside the shack's shadow. The place smelled of rust, dust, and death. A broken lantern lay on the floor. Sunlight speared through cracks in the walls. Colt shoved the table against the door and crouched near the window, rifle ready. The girl knelt nearby, breathing fast. "They'll burn us out," she said. "Not if they're too busy dying first." His voice was low, steady. He sighted through the hole in the wall. The first rider appeared, circling, torch in hand. Colt fired. The man fell backward, torch tumbling into the sand. The second rider reined in hard, staring toward the shack. For a long moment, the desert went still. Even the wind stopped. Then the sound of hooves retreated, slow, fading until only silence remained. Colt didn't move. He kept his gun aimed until the last echo died. Then, finally, he lowered it. "You killed them," she whispered. He didn't answer. He looked out through the slats of the horizon, endless, empty, painted in light. "You'll have the rest after me," he said quietly. "They'll bring more." She looked up at him, her eyes soft with something between fear and gratitude. "Then you should leave me," she said. "You've done enough." Colt looked back, jaw set, eyes hard. "You ain't dead yet," he said. "So no, I ain't done." Outside, a crow landed on the roof and called once, its cry long and hollow, the sound of a story far from over. By nightfall, the desert had cooled into silence. The air outside the shack was still, heavy with the scent of gunpowder and dust. Colt sat against the wall, rifle laid across his knees, the firelight flickering faintly against his weathered face. The Apache girl slept beside the dying embers, her breathing shallow but steady. He'd patched her wound again, wrapped it tighter, but the fever had begun to burn through her. Outside, coyotes called the moon, long, mournful cries that rose and fell like a song of death. Colt stared at the flames, his mind wandering to the ghosts of his own past. The burned ranch outside El Paso, the bodies in the dust, the sound of his brother's scream. He'd been running ever since, not from the men who killed his kin, but from what he did afterward. The fire popped, pulling him back to present. The girl stirred, murmuring something in her language. He leaned closer. "What's that?" he asked softly. Her eyelids fluttered, and she whispered, "The spirits walk tonight." Her voice was distant, trembling. They followed the blood. Colt looked toward the doorway, half expecting to see something moving in the dark. He'd seen enough death to know the desert didn't sleep easy. "Spirits can wait their turn," he muttered. "We got living to worry about." But her words lingered in his chest, heavy and strange. He poured the last of his water into her canteen and set it beside her. The firelight caught her face. Even exhaustion. There was a strength in her features, a pride that no wound could take. She wasn't just running from her people. She was running from a destiny carved in bone. Colt rubbed a hand over his face and sighed. "What's your name?" he asked after a while. Her eyes opened slowly, dark and sharp. "Naeli," she said. "It means I love you forever." The words hung between them like smoke. Colt looked away, embarrassed by something he couldn't name. "Pretty name," he said. "I'm Colt." She nodded faintly. "I know. My people spoke of a white man with a cursed name. A man who killed for silver, not for hate." Colt's jaw tightened. "Maybe once," he said, "but silver don't keep you warm at night." A long pause stretched between them. Outside, the wind began to stir again, sweeping across the desert floor. Naeli's eyes flicked toward the door. "They'll come again," she whispered. "Not my father, others, scouts, trackers, men who walk with no name. They won't stop." Colt loaded his rifle with calm hands. "Then neither will I." She looked at him for a long time, something unreadable flickering in her eyes. Pity, maybe, or trust. Then she turned away and closed her eyes again. Colt stood, walking to the doorway. The moon had risen high, casting the land in a pale glow that turned the sand silver and the rocks to bone. In the distance, a storm gathered, lightning crawling along the horizon like veins of fire. He watched it for a long moment, feeling the pull of something larger than himself. Fate, maybe, or guilt refusing to die. The desert whispered around him, cold and alive. Behind him, Naeli murmured in her sleep again, a single word over and over. "Run," she said softly. "Run before dawn." Colt looked out toward the storm and shook his head. "Not this time," he muttered. And somewhere in the distance, a lone drumbeat began again, faint but certain, a promise of reckoning drawing closer with the wind. The storm broke before dawn. Lightning split the horizon, white veins crawling through the black belly of the sky. Thunder rolled over the canyons like the growl of something ancient and angry. Colt woke to the sound of horses, faint, distant, but growing closer. His hand moved to his revolver before his mind caught up. The air was electric, thick with the scent of rain and blood. Naeli sat upright, her eyes wide, fear cutting through the fever. "They found us," she whispered. Colt crossed the window slit and peered into the darkness. Through the sheets of rain, torches flickered like restless ghosts moving between the rocks. He counted at least 6 riders, maybe more. "Too many," he muttered. The girl reached for him, weak but urgent. "You can still leave," she said. "They want me, not you." He looked back at her, the firelight painting his face in flickering gold. "Ain't how I was raised," he said. "If a man rides away from death once, it's luck. Twice, it's cowardice." He threw a blanket over her shoulders and helped her to her feet. The storm wind howled through the broken boards as they stepped out into the open desert night. Rain stung their faces, cold and sharp as glass. Colt led the mare from behind the shack, her coat dark with water, her breath steaming in the chill. He helped Naeli onto the saddle, then climbed up behind her. "Hold tight," he said. The first gunshot cracked through the rain, echoing like a whip through the canyon. Colt kicked the mare hard, and they tore through the mud, hooves splashing through shallow streams. The storm swallowed the sound of their flight, thunder masking the gunfire behind them. Still, the torches burned like angry eyes in pursuit. Naeli's head rested against his chest, her breath ragged. "There's a pass," she said, "beyond the ridge. My people call it a canyon of shadows." "Then that's where we're heading," Colt growled. They reached the ridge as dawn began to bleed across the clouds, a dull red smear on the edge of the storm. The path narrowed to a jagged cut through stone, barely wide enough for a horse. Colt glanced back. The riders were close now, shadows against lightning, rifles glinting. He drew his revolver and fired 2 quick shots. One rider fell, the other scattered. "Go!" Naeli shouted, gripping his coat. The mare stumbled, slipped, then caught her footing again. The rain had turned the ground slick as oil. Another shot rang out, and Colt felt the air split past his ear. He fired again, once, twice, until his revolver clicked empty. The thunder drowned everything. They broke through the last bend of the pass, the land opening before them into a wide basin of rock and sand. The storm was moving east, dragging the rain with it, leaving behind a ghostly mist that hung over the desert floor. Colt slowed the mare and looked back toward the pass. The riders hadn't followed. Not yet. Naeli sagged in the saddle, exhausted, her hair plastered to her face. "They'll come," she murmured. "They never stop." Colt holstered his gun and looked toward the horizon, where the faintest light of morning touched the world in silver and ash. "Then neither do we," he said quietly. The wind carried the smell of wet earth and gunpowder, the kind of scent that meant life and death had crossed paths again. Colt's jaw tightened as he looked at the girl. Too young to carry that much fear, too proud to beg. He felt something shift in his chest, something dangerous. The storm was leaving, but its shadow stayed with him. And just as the first ray of sunlight broke through the clouds, he saw movement on the ridge, a single rider watching from above, motionless, waiting. Colt's hand went to his revolver. "We ain't alone anymore," he whispered. The sun rose slow over the canyon, spilling pale light across the soaked earth. Steam curled from the rocks as the storm's breath faded, leaving the desert quiet, heavy, and raw. Colt dismounted, boots sinking into the wet sand. The mare trembled from exhaustion, her flanks streaked with mud and blood. Naeli sat still in the saddle, her head low, too weak to speak. Colt's eyes fixed on the ridge, the place where that lone rider had stood. The wind hissed softly through the grass, carrying a smell that didn't belong, smoke and gun oil. Someone was near. He crouched low, thumb brushing the grip of his revolver. Every sound in the desert sharpened. The tick of cooling metal, the faint drip of water from the rocks, the slow pull of his breath. Then he saw him, a figure on horseback, silhouetted against the brightening sky. Not one of the others. This man sat straight and still, like he'd been waiting a long time. The stranger rode down slow, the rhythm of his horse echoing through the canyon. When he stopped, Colt saw the face, weathered sharp, with a scar running from cheek to chin. "You've made a mess of things, cowboy," the man said, voice flat as dry stone. Colt didn't answer. The stranger tilted his hat back, eyes narrowing. "That girl, she's Apache blood, belongs to the chief himself. You took her, you doomed yourself." Naeli stirred weakly, lifting her head. "He saved me," she whispered. The man's gaze softened for a heartbeat. "Maybe so, but they won't see it that way." Colt stepped forward, his hand steady. "Who are you?" The man's lip curved into a small, bitter smile. "Someone who's seen too many men die for good intentions." He turned his horse, slightly, glancing toward the canyon mouth. "You've got an hour, maybe less, before the war party reaches you. Ride north through the basin. Follow the shadow of the cliffs. You might make it before night." Colt's jaw tightened. "Why help me?" The man's eyes lingered on Naeli. "Because once I didn't," he said quietly, "and I've been paying for it ever since." With that, he wheeled his horse and vanished into the rising sun, leaving only dust and silence behind. Colt looked up at the ridge where the figure disappeared, the echo of hooves fading like a ghost goodbye. He turned back to Naeli. "Can you ride?" She nodded faintly. He helped her down to drink from a puddle that had gathered in a hollow stone, then lifted her back onto the mare. The desert stretched before them, endless, shimmering, deadly. He looked north, where the cliffs cast long black shadows across the basin. "North it is," he said under his breath. As they began to ride, the morning heat rose, baking the land in white glare. Buzzards circled overhead, their shadows sweeping across the sand. Colt's mind churned with the stranger's words. Every man he'd ever known who tried to do right had ended up buried, in a nameless grave. Maybe he was next. The girl leaned back slightly, her voice barely a whisper. He was right. My father will come for me. Colt didn't reply. He just looked toward the horizon, where the land shimmered like fire. The sound of distant drums drifted faintly on the wind again, slower this time, heavier, as if the desert itself was warning them. Colt's hand tightened on the reins. "Then we keep moving," he muttered, "before the morning burns alive." The sun burned higher, washing the desert in white fire. Heat shimmered off the sand as Colt and Naeli pressed north, following the cliffs like the ghost of a road. Her head swayed with exhaustion, eyes half closed, breath shallow. Colt's shirt clung to his back with sweat, his throat raw from dust and thirst. The sound of hooves echoed behind them now, faint at first, then clearer, faster. The war party had found their trail. He turned in the saddle, scanning the empty land, and caught a glimpse of them, riders in dark paint, spears flashing the light, their voices rising with the drums. Fear crawled cold and slow through his chest. "Hold on," he whispered, kicking the mare forward. The canyon narrowed ahead, twisting into stone corridors of red and shadow. He steered them into the darkness, where the sun couldn't reach. Echoes of pursuit filled the air like thunder trapped in bone. The mare stumbled once, nearly falling, and Colt pulled her up, breath ragged. "Easy, girl," he muttered, patting her neck. He looked at Naeli, her lips cracked, her skin pale. "You said your father was a chief," he rasped. "Will he listen if we make it to him?" She met his eyes, and for the first time he saw the sorrow behind her strength. "He will listen, but only after he punishes you." Colt gave a dry laugh. "Fair enough." The canyon walls closed tighter, forcing them to slow. Above, the sky was just a thin blue scar. Arrows whistled suddenly from behind, clattering against the rock. One grazed Colt's arm, the pain sharp, bright, but clean. He fired back once, the sound exploding through the stone. A hawk screamed somewhere above, its cry mingling with the gunshot echo. Dust and gunpowder filled his lungs. The mare reared, terrified, and Colt fought to keep her steady. Naeli grabbed his arm. "This way!" she shouted, pointing toward a narrow split in the canyon wall. They turned sharply and slipped into a hidden ravine, a thin stream glinting like silver through the dark. For a while, there was only the sound of running water and pounding hearts. Then the silence broke again, a single voice calling her name. "Naeli." It was deep, powerful, filled with grief and rage. Naeli froze. "My father," she whispered. Colt's blood turned to ice. The Apache chief appeared from the shadows ahead, mounted on a white horse. His warriors fanned out behind him like ghosts. His face was painted in black streaks, eyes burning beneath the headdress of eagle feathers. He dismounted slowly, every motion deliberate. "You," he said, his voice low but thunderous. "You took her." Colt raised his hands slightly. "I saved her," he replied. "From wolves. From death." The chief's gaze flicked to his daughter, then back to Colt. "And now she is yours? That's what your kind believes." Colt's jaw tightened. "No, sir. She belongs to no man." A long silence fell, broken only by the whisper of wind and water. Naeli stepped forward, her legs trembling. "Father," she said, "he didn't hurt me. He helped me. Please." The chief looked at her, his face softening for just a moment, then hardening again. "Go back," he said. "Now." She shook her head. "Not without him." The words hung heavy in the air. The chief turned to Colt, his eyes narrowing. "Then you'll both die with the sun." Colt looked around. Outnumbered, no escape, the canyon closing like a grave. He holstered his revolver and exhaled slowly. "If I die for doing right," he said, "I can live with that." The chief raised his hand to signal the attack, but Naeli stepped between them, shouting something in Apache, her voice cracking like lightning. The warriors hesitated, confusion rippling through their ranks. The chief's hand dropped. Colt's heart pounded. The desert held its breath. And then, from somewhere beyond the cliffs, came the sound of thunder, not from the sky, but from riders. The scarred man from the ridge appeared, leading a small group of white flags and weary men. His voice boomed across the canyon. "Enough blood, Chief. The storm's taken enough of us." The chief's eyes flicked toward him, torn between vengeance and reason. The scarred man rode closer, lowering his gun. "She's alive because of him. Let that count for something." The chief looked at his daughter. Her face streaked with tears, and the fight went out of him. Slowly, he nodded once. The war party backed away, vanishing into the sunlit mist. Colt stood frozen, every muscle trembling. The chief rode past him without a word, only leaving behind one look, not forgiveness, but respect. Naeli turned to Colt, her voice a whisper. "Now you must go." He hesitated, then mounted his horse. "Guess I'm better at leaving than staying." She smiled faintly. "Not all who leave are gone." He rode away into the blazing horizon, the sun rising high behind him, dusk curling in gold.